There's a lot of lingo and industry terms when it comes to video editing. It really is its own world. So here are 20 plus terms that I think that you should know. Put me on in the background and let my soothing voice sink these terms deep into your skulls. Class has begun. Aspect ratio. Now in video editing, aspect ratio refers to the proportional relationship between the width and the height of a video frame. So it is always expressed as width, height. Example, 16:9 is a horizontal aspect ratio versus 9:16 is the aspect ratio for a vertical video. So common aspect ratios in video editing. Again, 16:9 is widescreen, 9:16 vertical video, 1:1 is square video. It's of course called that because the width and height are exactly the same. So if we talk about math and we talk about fractions, it deduces down to 1:1. There's 21:9 ultra wide, used for cinematic films. And then there is 4:3, which is a more retro look of video. It's an older standard that was used for TV a long time ago, but it's still used now today, again, for more of like that retro look. Resolution. Resolution refers to the number of pixels that make up a video frame, and that determines its clarity and its level of detail. While 16:9 refers to how the frame looks, 1920x1080 refers to the amount of pixels that are literally in this video image that we're seeing right now. And in this day and age, you can go as high as 8K, which we referenced earlier, and that is known as Ultra HD, and that would be 4320p. Frame rate. When you see FPS, we are talking about frame rate. That is frames per second. And it refers to the number of individual frames displayed per second of video. A million years ago, when they made video and it first came to light, they of course had to experiment with this on how many frames of photography, essentially, it would take to recreate the smoothness of real world motion. And they found that 24 frames per second is kind of the standard for how we move in the real world. So it has become the standard for film and production use, 24 frames per second. Now, since then it has expanded. 30 frames per second is a very common frame rate. It's often used for TV broadcasts or online videos, and it offers just a slightly smoother motion. Then there's 60 frames per second, and that can be common in gaming, in sports. It kind of creates this ultra smooth motion that looks almost not really real, but it also can be super helpful if you are shooting in 60 frames per second. You can then convert that video down to as low as 24 frames per second, and it will create a smooth slow motion effect. The same goes for 120 frames per second, which is also commonly used for slow motion. Bitrate. Now we're really getting into it here. Bitrate refers to the amount of data processed per second in a video file. Now it is typically measured in megabits per second, so Mbps, and it directly affects video quality and video size. A summary of information you would need to know about bitrate is that a higher bitrate is going to lead to better image quality but larger file sizes. A lower bit rate is going to lead to smaller file sizes, but may result in pixelation, it can result in compression issues, it can result in loss of detail. So if you're having trouble uploading a particular video, maybe it needs to be a very particular file size, or maybe your computer is kind of slow and it can't really handle large uploads, you could try affecting the bit rate, and that could help you be able to get a smaller size exported out of your software. But again, it could lead to some image quality issues. So you just want to make sure to double check that. There's a couple different types of bitrate out there. There's CBR, or constant bitrate. And if you choose that, that bitrate will remain the same throughout the entire video, ensuring very consistent quality. It's usually used for live streaming and broadcasting. Then there's variable bitrate, that's VBR, and that bitrate will adjust based on the video's complexity. So it will use more data for more detailed scenes and less data for more simple scenes. It is the preferred type of bitrate when it comes to high quality video compression. So think this YouTube video. It is going to be exported at a variable bitrate. Then there is adaptive bitrate, ABR, and that bitrate changes based on network conditions to optimize streaming quality. So this is used when you are streaming like for Netflix, for example. So I particularly have never used adaptive bitrate. I have more often seen either CBR or BBR. And here is just a quick look, maybe screenshot this if you would like some help on this in your next video. But here's just a look at some recommended bit rates for different video resolutions. So just keep these in mind. If you're having any trouble exporting, if your video is not looking the way that you want, you could always adjust the bit rate, and that could be the solution. Codec. The term codec brings me back to my sophomore year editing class, where my editing teacher tried to drill the term codec into all of our young little brains. And I've simply never recovered, but we're going to try and talk through what codec means in a way that is most practical for us, because quite simply, I don't think you need to know all the inner workings of how a codec does its job, but it is important to know in regards to some of the terms that we're going to talk about later, like transcoding. So if you look at any video file, you can see that it usually ends with either MP4 or MOV or some other ending. And that is a container format that video was compressed into living in. The thing that compresses that video into the container format is the codec. You can see why this can get a little technologically complicated. A video codec is the thing that compresses and decompresses video files to make video files and using those video files more easy to use. Here are a couple of example codecs that you might run into in your own video editing. So for example, we'll talk about transcoding next, but if you needed to transcode some files from very large sizes into smaller sizes, you might choose MOV to be the holding container that video file will live in. You like your videos in MOV format, that's great. You may choose the ProRes 422 option that will then give you that MOV format. ProRes 422 is the codec, and MOV is the holding container that video file lives in. Now that we've gotten through the simple things, let's move on to transcode. With transcoding, we are taking a video and we are transcoding it to be the same video, but with a slightly different either format or codec or resolution. Now this is done to optimize compatibility, to reduce file size, to make the video easier to work with in your software for many different reasons. Here are a couple common transcoding examples. Maybe you have really huge video sizes like in 8K and you need to edit with them. So maybe you reduce them down to ProRes 422, which is a codec that would lead to smoother editing in your software. Proxy. In video editing, a proxy is a low resolution version of a high resolution video, and it's used to make the video editing process smoother and faster. They often are used when you're working with files as small as 4K and as large as 8K. So how proxies work is that step one, the high resolution video files are converted into lower resolution versions. Then those proxies are what the editor uses to do the edit. Playback and working in the timeline is a lot easier when your video software is not consistently loading such large resolution files. So it just simply makes editing easier. Now, once the editing is complete, the software will automatically replace the proxy files with the original high resolution footage for the final export. Again, this is helpful for faster playback. It allows editing on less powerful computers, and it makes projects easier to share when you're working with smaller video files. And hey, if we haven't met yet, my name is Colleen, and in this channel, I help you to get a video editing job. So for more tips on that and to further support my channel, I would so appreciate it if you could hit the like button below and hit subscribe if you haven't already. Linear versus non-linear. Now we're getting into some history. Now, this is becoming more of an ancient history term in regards to video editing, but I do think it is important because it is still referenced. So it's good for you to know what it means. In short, linear editing is the kind of editing you would have done with physical film, and non-linear editing is the kind of video editing we do now. And it's really exactly why you might think. With editing nowadays, you can access any shot, any scene, any frame, whenever you want. And of course, it was not so simple for film. Back in the day, when you wanted to cut film, you have to make all of your edits in a very predetermined order because you were working in such a complicated process with it being film. There was so much more to it. You couldn't just make one cut and then decide you want to go back 3 reels earlier and then make another cut. You had to make all your cuts in a very predetermined order. Thus, the term linear versus nonlinear. All right, that was easier to explain than I thought it was, actually. Offline versus online editor. So step 1 of this, I think, is for us to determine what's the difference between online and offline in regards to editing. According to this thread on Avid's forum, the terms originated in the days of linear editing, where the footage was cut together, and when the reels were ready, they were connected to the editor and digitized into their final form. So the term has since been repurposed to separate resolutions, essentially. Online refers to the footage in its original size and resolution. Offline is another word for proxy. It's the same footage, but encoded into a lower resolution, so it's easier to work with. So how does this relate to editors today? So sometimes larger projects require both an online and offline editor when there's a lot of raw, large footage to be dealt with. The offline editor will focus on working with the low resolution footage to provide multiple edits without the issue of large file sizes slowing them down. Now, once the final edit is approved, the offline sequence is then relinked to the raw footage, and the online editor can focus on things they may or may not be involved in, like finalizing the edit, color grading, audio mixing, adding visual effects, quality control, and then ultimately exporting. These are all things that you would be doing with that raw footage. So it kind of separates the two jobs into the offline editor is doing really the core of the editing, and the online editor is doing all of the mastering and finalizing things when it comes to the edit. Online conforming editor. Now, there's the offline editor, there's the online editor. The online conforming editor is right smack dab in the middle. That process of converting the footage from offline to online to small files to big files needs someone to kind of specialize in it sometimes when it comes to these larger projects. So this is a person who takes the rough cut created in the offline editing stage and translates it into the final high resolution versions. They do this by conforming the edits to the original high quality footage, essentially matching the cuts and transitions from the low res edits to the full resolution files. Timecode. Timecode, when it comes to video editing, is a numerical sequence used to uniquely identify each frame in a video. It acts like a timestamp, and it helps editors and filmmakers and post-production teams to accurately reference and synchronize footage. It's typically displayed as hour, minute, second, frame. And again, it is very important because sometimes when it comes to syncing or conforming or in the transcoding process, sometimes you need to be really precise. And so having that very precise time code can be very helpful when you are matching edits or again, synchronizing things. And it also helps when you are working with a larger team. So you can reference very specific moments up to the frame. If you need to provide feedback on something, you can give it in that very specific way. Sync. Speaking of synchronization, let's talk about that. The term syncing in regards to video editing usually applies to the audio and the video. Often when you are shooting video, I do this myself, the audio and the video are recorded separately. So in order to bring them back together in the edit, it requires synchronization. Now you can sync them manually. For example, on larger film sets, you'll have a clapper. So you would synchronize the sound of what the clapper would make, which is that, to the visual of it touching the bottom of the clapper. You would sync those things two together, and then you have a proper sync. You can also synchronize using timecode, which is of course a more precise and effective way to sync timecode, but it does require the clapper to have the timecode capability. Synchronizing may also come into effect when you are talking about multi-camera editing. Maybe you shot a wedding and you have multiple camera angles of the ceremony. Well, you need to synchronize all of those first before you do any editing, or else you're going to be left with a really messy edit. And if you need to go back and change anything, it's going to make it really hard for you. So the whole purpose of that was when you have a multi-camera setup, you can synchronize it later in the edit. String out. A string out in video editing refers to a rough assembly of whatever selected clips you're using in your sequence, often in chronological order, without any extensive editing done yet. It kind of serves as a preliminary edit, and it helps editors or producers review all of the footage without making any big edit decisions yet. So the edits are usually very limited, maybe just the beginning and ends chopped off. And again, the footage is kind of laid out in shooting order or grouped by a certain theme. And no special things have been done to it yet. No color grading, no effects. It's simply used as just a reviewing process, looking at all of the footage from either the day or from the entire shoot. Stems. When it comes to video editing, stems is referring to the separate audio tracks that you may have in your timeline. Back when I was in my sound designing days, I worked with stems a lot because that was my job. As the sound designer of said project I worked on, once you are done with your sound design, you want to get all of those stems to the video editor to then place into the final video edit so that it can be matched and synced with the video and then export it out. But if you export the entire audio track all in of itself, if you had to make any last minute changes, it would be really hard to do that because it's all compressed into one audio file. Thus, the term stems was created. So some common types of audio stems include a dialogue stem that would just include all of the dialogue, a music stem, a sound effects stem, an ambient room tone stem, and maybe a separate voiceover stem if needed. All of these stems allow for more flexibility in the final edit if need be. And they allow more flexibility when it comes to mixing the final edit as well. Slug. A slug refers to a temporary placeholder clip that is used in the timeline. The most popular way that I've ever seen a slug is as a clip of black video that is put at either the beginning or the end or both of a sequence, and it includes no content. It is just black video. It can be used as the lead-in into a movie. If you are doing a movie export, it can be used so that you cut straight to black at the end of your video instead of cutting to the very last frame of the movie. It can also be used as a filler. It can be used to fill the gap for missing footage or any gaps that happen to be missing where you just want to make sure you account for that space and it doesn't get lost. You can add a slug in there, and that is a helpful way to use it. If you made it this far and you're liking this video, again, I'd so appreciate it if you could hit the like button below and hit subscribe if you haven't already. And for more details on how to become a YouTube video editor using Premiere Pro, check out my Skillshare class. The link is in the description below. J-cuts and L-cuts. J-cuts and L-cuts are specific editing techniques that are used to help make cuts seem a little bit more seamless rather than just up and down, placing your razor cut on the audio and the video in the exact same place. We are moving the cuts one way or the other so that it creates just a slightly more seamless blend in the edit. So in a J-cut, the audio from the next scene begins before the video of that scene shows up. And in an L-cut, it's the reverse. The audio from the current scene continues after the video cuts to the next scene. It is simply a video editing technique that you can use to just amp up your edits a little bit and make them just a little bit more advanced. Speaking of advanced, let's talk about the advanced technique of a jump cut. A jump cut is a video editing technique where you cut between the two shots of the same subject or scene, but with a noticeable gap between them, creating a kind of an abrupt transition. That's pretty much the majority of the edits in this video are jump cuts. And it's a very common and widely used editing technique in YouTube nowadays. In fact, people complain about it a lot, that it's just getting a little bit too jumpy, but it is a very simple edit. All it involves is taking the person who is talking or whatever is happening and simply removing space for however long. Could be a couple frames, it could be a couple seconds, and cutting out that time so that I can go from talking over here to talking over here. That's a jump cut. A-roll and B-roll. A-roll is the main footage that carries the primary narrative or message. A-roll is the main footage. This is A-roll. A-roll is me talking right now. I am the main footage in this video. And B-roll is supplementary footage. It's footage to support the A-roll, whether it is providing context or making things more interesting. So maybe in an example, the A-roll could be an interview with a chef and they are talking about their favorite dish, and their favorite dish is tiramisu. They tell you how they make it and why they love it and how amazing it is. The B-roll then would be footage of the chef preparing tiramisu, close-ups of the tiramisu, the ingredients turning into the tiramisu, and random people eating tiramisu. And me eating tiramisu, that would be the best B-roll footage. Color correction versus color grade. We're gonna simplify things here. Color correction aims to make the footage look natural. It is a way of balancing the footage and fixing issues like overexposure or underexposure, white balance issues, or color inconsistencies. It's a way to make the footage look as even as possible. So when you're watching the edit, you're not thrown off by the difference in color correction amongst different footage, depending on the lighting or different times of day or different types of cameras, because the color of one camera can differ greatly compared to the color of another camera. So that can be another way that color correction is used to balance between the two cameras, so that again, as a director or even as an editor, you're watching the edit and you're not thinking about how different the shots are because everything is color corrected. Color grading, however, is when you're adding a creative stylized effect to said footage, whether that is setting the mood or the tone or the general aesthetic of how the video or the movie or the project is going to look. You're doing a lot more manipulating of the colors and more stylized color work in order to create more of an artistic piece, if you will. Alpha channel. So when you're working with an asset that has transparency involved, maybe that's a logo or a special effect or a person placed in front of a green screen. The alpha channel is what helps the video editing software distinguish between what parts are transparent and what parts are not. Now, as a video editor, you might not run into an alpha channel a ton unless you work heavily in the VFX side of editing. Personally, I used to work with alpha channels a lot more whenever I was doing a lot more work in After Effects. And if you needed to export something out of After Effects that was either maybe a lower third or a general special effect of some sort, you would want to make sure that you export that video out of After Effects with the alpha layer attached to it, or else it's just going to show a black screen underneath the effect or graphic. So that's really the whole purpose of an alpha channel. If you don't have the alpha channel and you don't include it in your export, or if you downloaded it from something online and it's just showing a black screen or a white screen or the faux transparent screen, you think that you're downloading something transparent and you download it and then it turns out it's just the checkered gray and white screen. Those things do not have the alpha channel attached to the file. You need to make sure that you get a file that has the alpha channel attached. Keying. Keying is, again, related to visual effects. It is a video editing technique that is used to isolate and remove specific colors. Often this is green or blue, given that we usually work with green screens or blue screens, in order to make a portion of the video transparent. In Premiere Pro, where I tend to work, but in other softwares as well, there's usually an effect that is called keying, whether that be chroma keying, which would be keying out color, or luma keying, which would be keying out light, or ultra key, which I think allows you to key out whatever you want. Either way, it is a very fundamental tool when it comes to working with green screens or blue screens and doing compositing work. Keyframing. Keyframing is very different from keying. They don't have much to do with each other, except for they are both effects that you put on video. Keyframing refers to the process of setting specific points, those points being called keyframes, setting them along a timeline that define the start and end of a particular effect, usually involving motion or transformation of some sort. The keyframes tell the software how and when to change the property or value. And usually this includes changing the position, the scale, the rotation, the opacity, or different effects that you have added onto said footage. The software, whatever software you're working in, will interpolate the time between keyframe A and keyframe B, and it will create an animation of sorts to get you from A to B. So if you wanted to have a graphic pop into the frame like that, if it were me, I would take the graphic in the size that I want it to be. I would place a keyframe, saving that size and scale of the video. Then I would place a keyframe before that keyframe, and I would scale the video all the way so it is not seen. I also would add another keyframe. I would go to very briefly after the graphic has landed at the size that I want it to land, and I would push forward just slightly, and then I would take that keyframe and I would move it in between the 0 keyframe. When that animates, it will just add a slight bounce to the edit. Anyways, that is a way that I tend to use keyframes. It's a very simplified version, but that's essentially how it works. Okay, now we're moving on to a different area of terms where it's not so much about the video editing, but it's about what you make with the video editing in regards to selling yourself. So in this section, we are talking about sizzle reels, show reels, demo reels, and portfolios. What is the difference? Is there a difference between all of these? While all of them do showcase a video editor's work, each one does serve a slightly different purpose and is presented a little bit differently and is referenced a little bit differently. So it is important that you know the difference. Let's start with sizzle reel. The purpose of a sizzle reel is to act as a high energy, fast paced promo video designed to grab attention quickly and to showcase your best work in a very short amount of time. The length is usually relatively short. I think it could be as short as 30 seconds, maybe even shorter, but I wouldn't go past 1 minute for a sizzle reel. A show reel. Now, with a show reel, the purpose is to present a more polished and refined collection of your best work. If you are looking to work in the entertainment industry, you might use a show reel when you are submitting applications to production companies or agencies or studios. The length could be up to maybe 3 minutes or so. And again, the style is going to be in a more comprehensive, narrative-focused manner rather than a super fast-paced, attention-grabbing manner. You want to actually show them what your edits look like, and sometimes that takes a little bit more time to present that rather than just throwing everything at the person at once. Then there is the demo reel. Now, a demo reel is similar to a show reel, but it may be more focused on a particular niche. Maybe you create a demo reel to focus your skill set in motion graphics or for a particular genre of video editing. It may be a little bit shorter than the show reel, but again, just a little bit more niched, and you may want to create multiple of them if you want to apply to jobs in different niches. I would recommend creating different ones depending on the job that you're applying for. And then there is the portfolio. A portfolio, as we know it, is a collection of work that kind of serves to represent the whole of your work and what you offer as a video editor. Unlike a reel, it is less about a compilation of clips and more about a larger, more detailed showcase of your work. It may include multiple projects. It may include full-length videos. It may include case studies. It may include references. It may include testimonials. It may include editing breakdowns of your work and your projects. If you have a lot of experience going back years and maybe it all doesn't fit into a reel, or you created a show reel, but maybe your work expands even beyond that and you want a place for all of your work to live, maybe some of it even in its entirety, you could create an online portfolio, either using Adobe Portfolio or using your website to showcase the whole of your work. In that portfolio, you could be showing the different styles that you do. And here are some examples of those different styles. Again, you can include testimonials of past clients. You could include project descriptions of where and why each edit came to life, who you've worked with, challenges you ran into. It is a place for you to showcase all of your work and really just talk about and highlight you as the editor in all of your entirety. All of these examples of your work are going to be different depending on what you need. So you don't have to make each one of these in order to sell yourself properly, but given the description that I just gave, think about that. If you maybe have a demo reel made, but maybe you only have one, or maybe you have a sizzle reel made, but you don't have a showcase reel. So if you're able to get yourself in the door with that sizzle reel, but then the client wants to actually see what kind of editing you actually have done, you may want to have an example of that as well. So each one definitely serves a different purpose. So use it based off of your own needs and goals. Okay, class is officially ended. If you are struggling with understanding any of these terms, make sure to comment below. If I got anything wrong, I mean, I am an editor, but again, you saw me talking about codecs. I'm not a technology expert. Definitely leave your comments below if you have any notes or feedback or questions about any of these terms. I'd love to discuss them. Again, be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you to my editor, Logan. I will catch you guys in the next video. Have the best one.